to hear the testimony of the President's concerning the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request. I welcome Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Caine, and Acting Controller McDonald. As we review the past 5 months, the President and the Department of Defense have much to be proud of. The administration has largely succeeded in refocusing the Pentagon on warfighting. Our recruitment numbers have dramatically improved. That is a very important achievement and one we will continue to celebrate. The U.S. military has played a significant supporting role in the President's wholesale success at our southern border. He has achieved operational control over the situation, a position the vast majority of Americans support. In Operation Rough Rider, the President imposed costs on the Houthis. The operation was well executed by our service members, and it appears to have achieved its stated objectives for now. Similarly, the President has relentlessly struck Al-Qaeda and ISIS terrorists. Those strikes have helped to open up space for diplomatic breakthroughs in Syria, and they have prevented significant external attacks that could have emanated from Somalia. Unfortunately, the axis of aggressors is resilient. It is hell-bent on challenging American global leadership. It is clearer than ever that Vladimir Putin is uninterested in President Trump's and President Zelensky's offers for real peace negotiations. The Europeans are heeding the President's call to rearm, but we are in a tenuous period. A precipitate withdrawal of U.S. forces from Europe could undo all that progress. In Asia, the Chinese Communist Party continues its campaign of aggression against its neighbors and still displays open ambitions to retake Taiwan. Secretary Hegseth recently made this crucial point in an important speech in Shangri-La. He said, and I quote, "China seeks to become a hegemonic power in Asia," unquote. He is right. China intends to use military force to achieve Xi Jinping's goals. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Ayatollah is hiding as his regime crumbles. He is still refusing to negotiate. In short, this is the most dangerous national security moment since World War II. Unconstrained, aggressive dictators are on the move. And importantly, the character of warfare is rapidly changing. That is a dangerous combination. We cannot have an American-led golden age of peace and prosperity if we fail to navigate these historic security challenges. President Trump is actively working to protect American interests against 4 main adversaries: Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party, Vladimir Putin's militarized Russia, Kim Jong-un's North Korea, and the Ayatollah's religious fanatics, including his web of terrorists. Our Commander-in-Chief deserves a military capable of maintaining deterrence and applying force when necessary to protect U.S. interests, as he has done in Yemen. I regret to say that this fiscal year 2026 budget request will not deliver that military. When Secretary Hegseth testified before this committee in his confirmation hearing, he made the correct point that spending less than 3% of GDP on defense would be, and I quote, "very dangerous," unquote. What we have in front of us is an inadequate budget request with precious little detail and no follow-on data about fiscal years 2027, 2028, or 2029. We must assume, and in fact, we have heard, that OMB intends to maintain defense spending at $893 billion across the 4 years of this administration. So even with a one-time $150 billion reconciliation infusion, this would leave us at 2.65% of GDP by 2029, below 3% of GDP and well below the 5% of GDP that we really, really need. Clearly, such a budget plan would allow the military balance to continue, as it has been, to tilt away from the United States and toward Communist China. Communist China has increased its budget by over 7% each year for the past decade. I know the Secretary fought for a stronger fiscal year 2026 discretionary request, but we need to acknowledge that a flat fiscal year 2026 budget is what OMB delivered. I expect we will spend today reviewing the numerous significant holes in this request, gaps that will make it much more difficult for President Trump to equip our service members and for his advisors to develop credible military options. Across the budget, we see significant holes: shipbuilding, tactical fighters, basic maintenance money, and more, all insufficient. The budget seems to be written as if there are many items in the reconciliation package that simply are not in that bill. This is confusing because the text of the reconciliation bill has been public for quite some time. Chairman Rogers of the House and I worked closely with the executive branch and members of this committee on the contents of the package. This budget threatens to undermine the good work we have done together on that bill and leads me to question whether some officials in the administration plan to ignore congressional intent. I believe ignoring congressional intent would be a wrong-headed decision for the United States of America. We all work for the American people, and we share largely identical goals when it comes to deterring Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and other threats. We need to work much more closely together on investment strategies and actions necessary to rebuild our industrial base. The President and the Congress want action on reindustrialization. We want to rebuild the arsenal of democracy. We need action on industrial base integration, streamlined weapons sales, and cooperation with our allies and partners. We agree on fundamentally changing the way the DoD budgets and handles acquisition. Now we need to agree on providing the men and women of the Department of Defense with the resources they need to do their jobs. We have no time to waste. We must commit to continued collaboration now. With that, I turn to my friend and colleague, Senator Reid, for his remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, General Caine, Ms. McDougall, welcome. Mr. Secretary, as the Chairman has said, this is a dangerous moment. As we speak, missiles are striking cities across Israel and Iran, threatening to ignite a regional war. There should be no doubt that for the safety of the United States and the rest of the world, Iran cannot acquire a nuclear weapon. However, Prime Minister Netanyahu's decision to preemptively launch a war with Iran against the urging of the President threatens the stability of the entire region and the safety of Americans stationed there. The Trump administration must take urgent steps to prevent a wider war. Mr. Secretary, I would ask you to be crystal clear this morning about the administration's posture toward Iran. More broadly, Russia continues its bloody assault on Ukraine, unmoved by President Trump's negotiating tactics, and China is threatening our allies in the Indo-Pacific as America once again redirects its attention to the Middle East. This is a moment that requires leadership, expertise, and competence from the Department of Defense. And Mr. Secretary, I am concerned, frankly, that these qualities have been eroded under your leadership. In your opening statement, you write, quote, "At the Department of Defense, we are sweeping away distractions to focus on our core mission of warfighting," close quote. I'm a bit skeptical. Since you were sworn in, much of the Pentagon has been in disarray. You have purged thousands of defense experts, gutted oversight offices, and surrounded yourself with hand-picked loyalists. You have fired a number of our most accomplished generals and admirals with no explanation, no replacement. Your chief of staff, several top policy advisors, and chief spokesmen have all either resigned or been fired. This is a legitimate problem for our national defense. Much of the Pentagon seems to have been paralyzed by infighting and stripped of expert staff at a time when we need stability and professionalism. Mr. Secretary, You must address this so the rest of the department can be laser focused on their missions. I'm also concerned about your forays into diplomacy. The Secretary must be a capable statesman, especially in this dangerous global environment. During your first official trip to Europe, you made unfortunate mistakes, including by accidentally conceding America's negotiating leverage to Russia when you announced, quote, we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's 2014 borders is an unrealistic objective, and, quote, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. The State Department walked back your comments, but I worry that they cost us lasting credibility during peace negotiations and with our European allies. And Mr. Secretary, I hope you've learned from these episodes. The key to our long-run success against China, Russia, and Iran and others depend on our ability to equip our forces with the ships, aircraft, and weapons needed to effectively deter them, or if necessary, defeat them. Mr. Secretary, you have said that readiness is your top priority, but I'm concerned by a number of actions you have taken that seem to distract from readiness. For example, you're in the process of firing 8% of the defense workforce, or 75,000 employees, and you recently gutted the Office of the Director of Operational Tests and Evaluation, which is responsible for testing new weapons and platforms for warfighters. You have argued that these cuts were needed to eliminate wasteful spending, but you have simultaneously pledged hundreds of millions of dollars to convert a second-hand Qatari jet to be Air Force One. These decisions do not seem to align with readiness. Similarly, over the past 2 weeks, you have ordered 4,700 National Guard troops and Marines into Los Angeles against the will of the governor and mayor. These forces are in addition to the 13,000 troops you have deployed to the southern border, and separate from the 20,000 National Guard troops requested by DHS to help ICE conduct, quote, interior immigration efforts. As a consequence, military units have to cancel their National Training Center rotations and waste invaluable hours and resources performing DHS activities unrelated to their warfighting missions. I cannot imagine a faster way to erode military readiness and distract from our ability to deter China, Russia, and Iran. You also claim that merit is the only measure of performance under your leadership. That is a worthy principle. However, you refuse to explain you fired many of our most senior military officers, including the Chief of Naval Operations and the Commander of Cyber Command. All of these positions remain unfilled, which weakens our military. As importantly, these officers were fired without any justification, indeed without considering merit, which creates the worst possible outcome for a military force. Fear throughout the ranks that one should not speak up, should not refuse an illegal order, and should not call out abuse nor question decisions. I fear that last week's disturbing display of partisanship at President Trump's event at Fort Bragg is an example of this. Mr. Secretary, I hope you understand the grave risks of politicizing the military and that you will commit to preventing it. Finally, you have pledged to be transparent as Secretary of Defense, yet to date you have not held a single press conference at the Pentagon. Instead, you have evicted news outlets from the building, overwhelmingly restricted press access, and searched for leaks within your own staff, even threatening general officers with polygraph tests. This is not transparency, and it is a disservice to the American people who deserve to know what their military is doing. Ultimately, Mr. Secretary, this is a dangerous moment, and you must better demonstrate leadership, expertise, and competence atop the Pentagon. You are the 9th Secretary of Defense I have overseen as a member of this committee. In fact, this is the 26th time I have questioned the Secretary of Defense during their annual posture hearing. I have disagreed with each and every one of them on issues of policy and strategy, some more frequently than others, but I've always been able to work with them openly and earnestly because we shared a common agreement that our national defense supersedes partisanship. It's disappointing so far that we have not been able to establish such a relationship with this committee and with your department. Your candid and honest testimony today can go a long way toward making that possible, and I hope we can make that progress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. At this point, we'll ask our witnesses to summarize their testimony in 5 minutes or shorter. We begin with Secretary Hegseth. Sir, welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, we appreciate the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 26 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify alongside General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and Bryn McDonald, who's performing the duties of DoD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We are also very proud to represent our warriors and their families. And today, as they do every day, they're keeping our country safe. They're defending our homeland. They're standing up to communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners. They are achieving peace through strength. I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. That includes an additional 10% raise for our junior enlisted service members E1 to E4. Thank you for supporting our initiatives that improve quality of life for our warriors and their families. Things that include making historic investments. This budget makes historic investments in living conditions, in barracks, in base housing. This budget reforms the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moves for families. We've already seen changes there. And we improve the quality of care provided by our defense healthcare system. The best part of my job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. We hear their concerns. We know what it's like to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback that we've gotten from the force. We are listening, and we are always looking for ways to improve quality of life for those who serve. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961.6 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion for national security, will end 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. Now, as is custom with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary to implement presidential initiatives. So in the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. We found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department. And this savings, if you add this savings to our overall budget, we're increasing the DoD budget in 2026 by $143 billion. We do that by killing wasteful programs, targeting bureaucratic excess, and redirecting funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. We're working with the Department of Homeland Security to increase border security, to reduce China's malign influence in the Western Hemisphere, to defend freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, as we would all acknowledge, there's more work to do. I've got 3 core priorities in the department: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we're restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump has charged me to focus relentlessly on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, and that is exactly what we're doing. We're setting standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach, and the force is responding incredibly. Because of President Trump and his America First priorities, recruitment and retention are higher than they've been in decades. Historic surge of young Americans who want to join our military. Second, we're rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged, yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump is correcting that. We're reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process, rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons to meet the challenges of the future. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces as we face rising nuclear dangers. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. The budget will revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, and that's on top of $47 billion overall for shipbuilding. The budget significantly increased